Hello, everyone. My name is Lucian. Most of you know me from Twitter as Triangle Investor. In today's edition of CEO and Market Expert Interviews, I'm very pleased to have a new guest in my show, which is representing a new uranium company on the market. The guest is Tim Rotolo, and the company is Prremier American Uranium. Tim, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having us. Very
Thanks.
excited to be here.
Me too. Tim, let's start with the origin story, your background. I personally know it is very interesting and that you have been involved in uranium, but not from a mining perspective, since you are coming from the finance world. So I will stop talking. Tell us, please, more. Who is Tim Rotolo?
Yeah. It's a bit circuitous. I mean, I guess some people might find it interesting. I started my career in basically as a client associate at Merrill Lynch, broker's assistant, and realized very quickly I didn't love that role. Moved to New York. I was in Boston at the time. Moved to New York. Actually, I'll go way back because I was watching Oppenheimer last night, and I did my senior thesis in college under Martin Sherwin, who wrote the book American Prometheus, which is now was turned into the movie.
Excellent.
Yeah, and actually my thesis was about Project Paperclip, where the U.S. went to Russia and took over and took German scientists, really, but it was competing with Russia for German scientists that ultimately built the U.S. space program with Werner von Braun, and so it was just very. I happened to be reading Martin Sherwin's obituary. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2021, and there's this whole passage about how he in college he went to Wyoming and was trying to mine uranium. So just this kind of weird circularity of life. But so went, after college, went to Merrill Lynch, ended up working in a group that did asset allocation. So kind of David Swensen endowment model, asset allocation. And then in 2009, after the great financial crisis, realized, man, that, maybe Wall Street or kind of like being at a big bank like Bank of America was not the best place to be for my career, although I'm sure it would have been fine. So I went to a fund of hedge funds that, and again, this is somewhat fortuitous for me, was investing in distressed debt hedge funds. So David Tepper of Appaloosa, Josh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on Josh's last name. The guys at Canyon. So kind of the who's who of event-driven investing and value investing. And that really changed my thinking about how I wanted to invest, right? This focus on really trying to find the best risk-adjusted returns or risk rewards and asymmetry and looking for these event-driven, thesis-driven opportunities. And so I had kind of this brush with uranium in 2012. We happened to go meet a guy named David Iben, who runs Coppernick now. David at the time was going to work for a guy called Jeff Vinnick up in Boston. Jeff's very famous, ex-Fidelity. And this was in 2012, right after Fukushima. And so David starts talking to us about, Denison and fission. I think he owned some Cameco at the time. And so, I'm looking at it as, I really had no idea what the guy was talking about at the time. It was just a total sideshow to me. But I kept that in the back of my mind, and fast forward. So it ended up being there for a while, but decided I wanted to go do my own thing because I was seeing all these inefficiencies in the market, and we weren't really set up to take advantage of them. And I left in 2015, kind of dabbled in a few things. And then in 2017, happened to be on Twitter, of all places, and I see this guy talking about uranium. And I'm like, this can't be David Iben. I think his name was Deep Value Buyer at the time. Now it's, Footnotes First. And it was Mike. And he had this fascinating, incredibly well thought out thesis about a supply deficit forming in uranium and that the stocks were left for dead. And, it's the same thesis that people talk about today, right? This was like December of 2016, I think. And so I ended up meeting Mike, and he and I got to chatting, and we decided that it would make sense. He was writing a newsletter at the time, and that this is a really interesting vehicle to look at, trying to launch as a traditional limited partnership. The thing I saw in it that I thought was so interesting was it felt like post reorg equities. So when you're a distressed debt buyer, you get a lot of times you end up with these post reorg equities, and the companies are incredibly de-risked because they've gone through bankruptcy, they've delevered. The sectors are often left for dead because they're so small. There's no sell side coverage. They're too small for generalists. Again, kind of the exact same backdrop as uranium had in 2017, 2018. So long story short, we launched a vehicle to take advantage of the uranium thesis. And then in 2018, one of our first investments was staking this land in Wyoming and Colorado, which was our company that we started called Prremier Uranium Inc. It was one of the earliest investments. And we were approached by a group who had been involved in the prior cycle, the CEO of a company called Cyclone Uranium, and he handed us a technical report. He shepherded us through the claim staking process, and then we got through that, and he was very helpful in getting us up to speed and what is claim staking and how does the Bureau of Land Management work. And we looked at it, and Mike, I'm sure if you haven't put it up there yet, but I mean it's a great presentation from Cambridge VRIC, I think it's called.
Cambridge House, former.
Yeah, Cambridge House, exactly. So Mike and I went out to Vancouver in 2017, and he gave that speech, and he talked about the geopolitical risk that Russia presented to the uranium market back then. And so I think in the back of our minds, or back of Mike's mind, there was always this opportunity in the US that there would be this resurgence of interest in, national security risk around uranium mining, the realization that we should have our own domestic production. And so, our ability to go out and stake this project at that time just represented this very interesting source of optionality. Obviously it needed higher prices, but that was our thesis anyways. So if the thesis played out and then some other good things happened, all of a sudden this could be a very real opportunity. And so we basically sat on the land. At one point we optioned it to a group run by Grant Davey. Grant's been involved in Lotus and Boss, great management team. And so they had some thoughts about moving into the US that didn't ultimately pan out. But it got us really prepared to think about bringing the company to market in a more formal manner. And so in 2022, when Energy Fuels and Consolidated Uranium did their deal, I had an opportunity to go meet with Phil and Marty out in and actually sit with Mark Chalmers. I apologize for my dog in the background. Sit with Mark Chalmers and go to White Mesa. And then I spent the next 2 days touring around Utah and Colorado with their technical team. And I just kind of looked at it and said, this is a perfect home. They had done Labrador as a spin out. And it kind of the two ideas where I said, man, there's two big missing components for our team. One is capital markets and how to get the company public. I had a little bit of experience during the cannabis boom. I worked with a group and we tried to take a company public. So I had a little bit, I knew enough to be dangerous in that space, but I knew that the Consolidated team had all the pieces in place to be able to do this. And Labrador was a great playbook for us to look at. And then I met the technical team and I said, this is a huge competitive advantage, or could be a competitive advantage to our team, and something that we'll never be able to replicate. And sat down with Phil and Marty, and I think there was an immediate just, connection that, wow, this is a great way for them to take some non-core assets that they're not going to have the time and resources to be able to expend on, and then combine our teams. And again, really grow the relationship of the Sachem team and the Consolidated, or now ISO team. And we've done that, in a meaningful way. We ended up being a lead investor in ISO. We're going to be involved in Athos. So, we've really tried to expand that relationship in a meaningful way. So that was kind of laid the groundwork for this deal. And then, obviously you just have to, kind of grind through the paperwork and getting the assets all together. But obviously the company listed last week. We did a financing for about $7 million Canadian. So the company's in a really good position. And, even leading up to the merger process, we were doing work on kind of both sets of our assets. So Prremier American Uranium, our Cyclone asset, is kind of the flagship. That was the one that, Sachem staked in 2018. And then we also have the DOE leases in Colorado. And so as we were working on the merger, we did some airborne geophysics surveys that produced some really interesting results. That's going to really drive where we focus our time and attention for drilling.
Yeah,
and
Tim,
then,
we will come to the
yeah,
details of the
yeah, yeah,
project.
yeah.
That is a great background you told me,
Yeah. So I
especially.
went a little deeper than I probably needed to.
No, great, I love it, especially the part I didn't knew that you met Mike via Twitter.
Of course, yeah. Well, where else do people meet each other these days?
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100%. Tim, let's touch a bit on the uranium market. Is there a better place to be right now, considering the fundamentals of the industry and more than a decade of bear market behind us? Using basketball game analogy, what would you say, in which quarter are we right now?
It's so hard for me to judge because I can make the argument that we're, in the first quarter or the second quarter. I think a lot of it depends on your risk tolerance
Of course.
and kind of where you're positioned in the industry. So for smaller companies, I think if you're involved in the right ones, those are still in the very early innings because, prices have just gotten to the levels that make those projects viable. That's what gets us so excited about Prremier. For certain other, again, I think it depends on, what you need from a risk reward out of investment. I don't know where physical goes, but let's just say it's another double. Some people may think, that's not a great risk reward. I can't find anything else out there that appears as attractive with, so many positive fundamental catalysts occurring in real time.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, maybe halfway through, but again, that's
a good prognosis. Okay.
yeah.
I will take that one.
I think that's always one of the most challenging aspects, right? Because I'll just tell you, this year I think has been so fascinating as you've seen a lot of interest come in around nuclear. Certain parts of the market haven't really participated, right? The lower ends of the market have not, but Cameco obviously has had a fantastic year. And so I look at this massive resurgence in interest in nuclear and say, there are people who literally don't know how much nuclear power is used in the United States, right? And so this is a brand new thing for them. For us, we're like, this is so obvious. I made a joke on Twitter yesterday about some article that came out in the FT about Western uranium concerns around Russia and China. I was like, yeah, like Mike's been saying that for 6 years. So that's the challenge, is when we've been involved for so long and kind of watched the whole cycle play out. And then, but in some respects, you look at how big the ETFs are, and even the overall market cap of the sector, and the kind of importance of the overall sector to global energy, you can make a case that it can go become a lot bigger. So
yeah, definitely, and I would agree with you, with the juniors lagging more than, let's say, Cameco, who is now at all-time high, like also with UEC, NextGen, and some big guys. And especially if you look at the Australian listed uranium stocks, they're like not performing well, but they will start eventually.
Yeah, there's a broad dichotomy, and again, not to bring everything back to Prremier, but that's part of the opportunity that gets us really excited. And again, you look at what Consolidated has done, or excuse me,
Yeah.
I'll refer to them as ISO. What ISO has done in terms of accelerating some of this consolidation and really being creative. And I think we want to take a similar view on the market, because we do think that there is this bifurcation, right, of the haves and the have-nots. And we think we're, more maybe because of who we're backed by.
Yeah.
I would say if we didn't have the backing of ISO, Sachem, and Mega, and a handful of other LPs, we would be in a different position. But we do. We're the beneficiaries of those relationships, and so there is an opportunity to go out and consolidate more of these small players who have not been able to get financing, or maybe they've raised capital, and really been quite dilutive to their shareholders, and so now they have big overhangs of stock. But again, we just think there's a tremendous opportunity to consolidate. Obviously, our focus is the U.S., but I think you'll see us out there pretty aggressively trying to do that.
Excellent. Your company started trading on TSXV on Friday, December the 1st.
Yep.
How was the first days of trading? How is the volume going?
Volume's been picking up over time. It was slow, so but I think some of that was just mechanical stuff around people not having shares, and it's a very tightly held stock.
Yeah, that's the price of having tight share structure
Yeah,
with a small
exactly.
float. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, but I think you're starting to see. I think David Talbot put out a note today highlighting the company, which is great, and we appreciate the coverage from David.
Yeah.
And we will have a market maker starting to work with the stock, which I think should help just tighten the bid ask a little bit. But
yeah,
you're right. It's a double-edged sword having a tight float. Sachem owns something like 46% of the stock. Obviously, we're long-term holders. Mega owns about 5. Consolidated owns about 13. So, I think
it's tight.
It's going to just take some time to see some real volume. Today, there was already some better volume.
Yeah. Let's go to the next question. I want to ask you a simple question. What is the plan? Maybe it's not that simple. You will judge on that. What is the plan for the company? Is it to bring the value to shareholders through exploration and bring the projects to production development stage and then sell it? Or you are taking much longer plan here, maybe to take this company through production and further expansion?
I think it's a little early to talk about production, but I think our objective is really a dual path of shareholder value creation. So M&A on one front, and then exploration and development on the other. We think we have really interesting assets. We think we can bolster those assets through M&A, and so our primary focus right now is really trying to find synergistic assets rather than just trying to go buy a disparate project because it adds pounds. So we have a nice pipeline on the M&A front, and we have a plan for drilling in our Cyclone project, and then we're going to spend the winter developing plans for the DOE leases down in Colorado, primarily Atkison Mesa, and one of our other projects down there will be the focus.
Okay, Tim, why did you decide for the US and not Canada? What are the advantages for one exploration company of doing business in the US compared to, let's say, Athabasca Basin Explorers?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to the genesis of our interest in the Wyoming project, which was that it was kind of this out of the money call option on geopolitical risk and also, $80 uranium prices. And so here we are. And, I don't think we felt like we could operate in Canada in the same way. Just there is, challenges cross-border. And, some of it is we were presented a project by a U.S. geologist who had a lot of familiarity. And so we felt like, we didn't have like an edge in the Athabasca. Whereas the U.S. we felt was, at the time very mispriced. And we were, handed a very interesting project kind of on our lap. So, somewhat it was, the circumstances presented to us, but I think today, again, we feel like the U.S. represents a jurisdiction that we understand the rule of law, we understand kind of the political situation in Wyoming and Colorado, and our partnership with Consolidated gives us access to a very significant team of technical experts in the U.S. as well. So we're trying to leverage our strengths. I 100% understand why people like the Athabasca and why they want to target that area, but again,
it's a different story. It's a
exactly. It's very, very, very different. And if you look at the proximity of our projects to some really interesting infrastructure, in Wyoming, obviously Lost Creek, and then White Mesa, the proximity to our projects in Utah and Colorado. We think it kind of gives us a unique position in the market today.
Yeah, agreed. You touched on the Cyclone project. Please give us an overview of the project. I mean, this project is in situ recovery potential, ISR potential. It has ISR potential. I presume that is what the geology is telling you there, and probably the data you have, especially historical drill data. Tim, can you expand on the historical data part? What was done before, and how much of those data do you actually have at your hands?
Yeah, so we have about 80 drill holes that were drilled from in the 2007 range by Turnagain. We have the logs for that, and again, we flew this airborne geophysical survey. We identified some very interesting anomalies that.
I'm sorry, when was that?
We completed that in December. That data is available on our website. You can see it, overlaid on. Actually, it's overlaid on the drill holes in our presentation, and you can see it lines up pretty nicely with the drill holes. So some of our work now is going to be confirmatory drilling, and to your point, the grades suggest that this is ISR amenable. That's our focus is now trying to prove out how big the resource is. The original technical report had an estimate of kind of 8 to 12 million pounds. That was done by Doug Beam, so we feel pretty good about that. What we also did with that airborne geophysical survey is it identified some open land to us. And so prior to the merger, we actually went out and we staked a land. We basically did about 1,000.
What are the plans for the next 12 months besides the exploration work you will carry? You also have a drilling projected next year.
Yeah, so we hope to start drilling in Q2. We're finalizing our permits and licenses with the BLM right now. We hope to have that completed this month, and then we got to wait for the sage grouse and some burrowing owls, and then we should be able to hit the ground running after that, and weather as well in Wyoming. But I think we're pretty well set up to start drilling as soon as it's practical from an environmental perspective.
With this drilling campaign, together with the historical data you have, will this altogether be sufficient to confirm those historical data and define this project as NI 43-101 resource category?
I think we'll need to see. Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think we need to see how the results go.
Okay.
But that is the objective. Yeah.
That is the objective. Okay. How is the accessibility there and the infrastructure on the property?
It's outside of weather, it's fine. BLM roads in and out. There's been drilling there. We have drill rig operators that are ready to go. So it's the primary issue seems to be the snow in the winter months.
Yeah. You mentioned some of your neighbors. Your Energy Lost Creek project is near to your project. Who else is there?
GTI is in that realm. I want to say Strathmore. I mean, again, we're in the Great Divide, so these are pretty expansive parts of Wyoming. UEC. So there's quite a few players in the area.
Yeah. Wyoming is a good place to be for uranium,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Any available land for staking in the proximity of your project? Is there any land left for staking?
Yeah, there's always land. I think the question is kind of the cost
Quality.
benefit of adding additional claims. It's not an insurmountable cost, but it's also not, may not be the best use of our capital. So, that's really what we tried to do with that. The results of that survey was identify pockets of land that positioned us to block out anyone else from, encroaching on our position as we expand the resource. So we feel pretty comfortable that we've taken all those positions that we need for the time being.
Okay. Do we have projected budget for this project in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, $1.5 to $2 million.
Okay, that makes sense
Yep.
for this kind of work. Tim, let's discuss your second project, and that is Monogram Mesa in Colorado. Did I pronounce it right?
Yep.
Okay. I would like to cover similar things with this project. Please, first of all, give us an overview of this project.
Yeah, so these are historic DOE leases. There's past production. Again, this is more of a conventional mining, so bit different. The thing that gets us excited, so a couple of things kind of macro about Colorado, because there is no real conventional milling available. We feel like there hasn't been a lot of competition until someone figures out how they're going to mill the material. There's not a lot of I guess need to go out and acquire land, and so we're probably one of the larger landholders in the state. We hope to be able to leverage at some point the ISO relationship with Energy Fuels to kind of again bolster our competitive position. But these are projects that has had past production. There's more work that we need to be able to do in order to identify how big this resource is. But we kind of have this thesis that comes from one of our geologists that a lot of the original mining that was done there and even the exploration was very superficial. Again, these are large mesas. And so a lot of it was done on the face of these mesas, which means they didn't really kind of go into the mesa. And so there's no reason to believe if there was, ore exposed on the exterior that would not kind of extend in. And so that's where we'll be spending a lot of our time, is trying to identify whether or not that thesis is accurate. But again, we think the past production and DOE resources that are there is very indicative of a real opportunity. That's another area where we think there's M&A potential. We have done a fair amount of additional staking in that area as well prior to the merger. Again, just trying to kind of block out any potential competitors from areas that we think are attractive. But there's a fair number of small operators there that we think could potentially be in play.
Okay. Same question as before. Do you have the budget? And tell us, please, a little bit more about the plans for the next 12 months.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're going to be spending probably the next 2 to 3 months, is developing a budget, really trying to develop a plan of how we want to attack the exploration in that area. So, from a sequencing perspective, our top priority is Cyclone, and then kind of once we get those pieces in place, we'll move on to advancing the work at Monogram and Atkinson.
Okay, let's touch on Atkison Mesa project that is also in Colorado. Is that close to the other Colorado property, or how
Yes,
this?
I mean, close, I guess, is a relative term. I mean, they're all kind of consecutive, north to south, but there will be some economies of scale there. But I think that the thesis is identical, right? All these Mesa projects, they're all DOE resources with past production. So it's really about trying to sequence that the exploration plans there.
Okay, okay. Like you said a couple of times, you are M&A oriented company, and that is great to hear. But what are you targeting? Is it just the properties near to your existing ones, or we could see some jurisdictional diversification and also buying some advanced projects, maybe? What is on the table here?
So I think in the US,
Yes.
anything is on the table. I think we are probably going to skew more towards exploration projects, but to the extent that there is something that is more advanced, we will absolutely look at it.
Mhm.
So, I think we do want to get some diversification if possible. I think again we have ISR, we have Hard Rock. Um, I I guess my answer is, we want to be opportunistic, and then we want to be disciplined on price. Outside of that, in the US realm, I think we're pretty open. I guess the other issue or concern was I don't think we're going to try and do anything, new, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think we're going to try and go find a mine in some, brand new state that no one's and I would say we're probably going to stay more Western, right? Like I don't think you're going to see us go to Texas. Um,
Okay.
So I don't think just given the size and scope of our team today, I think we want to be, really try and identify those synergistic assets um, that are going to bolster our existing projects.
Got it. Who is in your team? Who are the people behind the company?
So today I'm CEO. The directors, Marty Tunney from ISO, Dan Noth is another director, Mike Harrison, who works at Sprott, great guy. Our CFO is Greg DeRoss, so we're using the ISO, leveraging the ISO team there. And then on the technical side, we have 3 consultants, again, shared with ISO, and then we're going to be adding a VP of exploration, hopefully here in the next few weeks. Um, so we
Some
have Ted.
familiar name from the industry, maybe.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much, but
Okay, I understand, of course.
I'm sure folks will know him.
Okay.
Yeah, Ted Wilton, Josh Holland, and Tyler Johnson, on the technical side. And again, all 3 of them have a ton of experience in the US. And we also have the benefit, Mike is kind of transitioning out, but Mike Newman, and between Mike and Ted, they're just encyclopedic knowledge of the US uranium industry is incredibly helpful, particularly on the M&A front. We're just able to cycle through opportunities very quickly because they both know pretty much every asset out there. They've either worked on them. Ted is, a few things that we're looking at. Ted was, the earliest geologist working on the projects. And again, that's the fascinating thing I find about uranium is, it goes through these cycles, but a lot of these projects never come into production, right? So the same projects from the 80s that, they're still there, right? And there's still exploration projects today. And it's it's really helpful to have this, deep experience team. And so, yeah, the objective over the next, 3 to 6 months, again, I think we want to stay lean, absolutely, because I think just one of our kind of pillars is being, incredibly capital efficient and disciplined with our capital. And so, not kind of growing a big team until there's a need to do that is something that we're trying to be very thoughtful about. But adding some resources, on the ground that are dedicated to our team will absolutely be a focus.
Okay. Tim, are you fully funded for the things you plan to do on those projects for the next, let's say, 6 months, 12 months? Are you fully covered?
Yes. Yeah, multiple times covered. So I think we probably raised a little bit more capital than we need, but again, we want to be in a position to be able to do M&A, and if we need to use cash again, we can do that with a little bit of it. But yeah, we have a fair amount of financial flexibility.
Okay, that's great to hear. For an average investor, what and when can he expect? What kind of news flow in the upcoming period?
I think it's always challenging. I mean, I think you know, again, maybe some of the hires that we're doing. I would think on the M&A front, that will probably be the most near term. I'm not sure if we'll necessarily press release any of our, kind of the finalization of our permitting and licensing process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would think it's going to be more around M&A in the near term, and then as kind of Q1, Q2 roll on, you'll start to see some of the news releases about Cyclone.
Okay, looking forward to see them.
Yeah.
That was Tim Rotolo. Tim, I wish you luck with your new venture and with all your projects, of course. Thank you for coming to my show, and I hope we will chat soon again, especially if we see some positive news flow from the company in the near future. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate the support.